What is up? It is Sam here. Today, we've got a special guest. My buddy Ross is going to come on. We're going to be talking about some really awesome stuff, some really interesting stuff that's happening right now in the crypto space in general. There is a feverish amount of development and creativity that is happening across the space. We've got the merge with Ethereum happening, which allows us to basically have a preview of what is going to happen with Pulse Chain, because we're going to get free tokens. We're going to get all of our ERC20s on Ethereum proof of stake copied on proof of work Ethereum. So we're going to preview of what's going to happen there. We also are going to touch on Hedron, Icosa, and Hex. What's going on there? There's somebody in the Hex community, Matty Allen, who's coming out with his own project. We're going to try and touch on that a little bit as well. And without further ado, let's bring in Russ. My man. It is good to see you or hear your voice. It's been a while.
Yes, yeah. Well, it's you too, Sam, as well. I think, as I've said to you before, this stream will probably be a little bit more me learning from you last time rather than the other way around. We were talking about Bitcoin and RSK, and it got quite technical, didn't it? But, I've been in the space a while, and I'm still learning so much. I mean, even if you're full-time crypto, which I'm not, it's just hard to keep up, right? And I'm still learning all the time. And if you think you don't need anything more to learn, then there's probably something wrong, right? Unless you're Richard Hart, who kind of claims he knows everything. But apart from that, happy to be on here and learn a bit more, and let's see what happens.
After our conversation a couple months ago, where I learned about, I think it's called Sovereign, the bridge with Bitcoin to the RSK chain. And I was having a conversation with a couple of people who were part of the founding team with, they're going to be launching something on Pulse. And they were talking about how they have the admin keys for for a bridge that they're creating to other networks. And they're like, there's none out there that are trustless. And I was like, wait. I learned about this from Russ. Yes, there is. The Sovereign bridge for the RSK chain from Bitcoin. It is a trustless, and I don't know if they liked me pushing them on that, but
yes,
I enjoyed our conversations over Facebook, and I think that having them live here would hopefully be helpful or valuable to other people. So let's just dive into the Ethereum merge of I know you have some interesting things that you were sharing with me, about the merge, but then I also want to hear about the fork. There's already a bridge out there and a test net for the Pulse or for that. So go ahead, wherever you want to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I'll try and keep things as high level and as simple as I can here, because I know I have some novice viewers who are viewing this right now, or who I've asked to anyway. They're all quite new to the space as well. But in terms of the free coins and that lot, that's very interesting, Sam. I wasn't aware of that, and I would say you're probably one of the few, if not about the only channel that's been talking about this. I was aware that obviously if the fork happens, that there would be a copy of Ethereum to be, there would be this ETHW coin or whatever they're going to call it eventually. But I wasn't aware that there was going to be a complete copy of the whole system staked. Now, it's interesting, because is it going to be a cash grab, or is it going to be, well, hey, this thing's been running for the last 8 years, very, in a very robust fashion, but maybe we'll stick with it.
It's literally the most used network.
Exactly. Now, the thing then becomes, well, hang on, is this just a minority group of miners that are going to do this fork, and it's just going to be a minority set of transactions running, right? Which is generally the hunch that I would have to say, yes, that's probably what's going to happen. The masses are going to move across to proof of stake. And that's kind of also been indicated by the market movements over the last couple of months, the price action, right? There's some excitement about the merge, you could say. And the question then becomes is that if you're getting a one-to-one copy, well, think about that for a second, right? There's a lot of tribalism in crypto, a lot of tribalism, right? We all know about that, right? Is it going to be the case that the proof of work haters, as in the new proof of stake community or whatever you want to call them, the haters on the proof of work chain are going to just dump the ETH, right? Because it's one-to-one, right? So because it's one-to-one, they can just dump that lot immediately. Now, what's so clever about Pulse Chain and what Richard Hard has designed, which is absolute genius, right, is this when Pulse Chain launches another fork, essentially, it's not going to be a one-to-one copy from ETH to Pulse, is it? It's going to be 1,000,000 to 1. So I think it's 1,000,000 Pulse to 1 ETH. So the Ethereum the Pulse Chain haters, the Ethereum guys who hate Pulse Chain can't dump on Pulse Chain, right? So you're not going to get this big effect at all on Pulse Chain in terms of price or the price of Pulse itself. But you could in the Ethereum proof of work copy, right? It could just be an immediate cash grab and move on, and a kind of an FU to all the Ethereum proof of work guys to say, hey, we've moved on, we've dumped all the coins. Could that play out? I don't know.
Do you think though that there is, whenever somebody like comes out with something new, say I'm going to use like a grandpa or my dad, not necessarily my dad, he seems fairly adaptive, but somebody who is maybe older than us by a certain amount or has a lot of vested interest in a certain direction. Say like Warren Buffett, right? He has an investment portfolio and it's primarily held in USD, right? So when you think about Warren Buffett, his prerogative is going to be to only view USD in positive light and not view something else in positive light, like crypto, like given his statements. Now, when you think about this relative to proof of work with Ethereum, the fork, right, the ETH versus proof of stake, you have a large portion of people, and I don't know the proportion size, right, but it's made up of developers.
That's right.
It's made up of miners, and then it's made up of users. And maybe I'm missing a stakeholder there, but the people who, right, we have developers, they don't really have a lot of time, or I mean, they have time, but they don't really have, they have money invested, but not in the same sense as in like, I'm going to spend thousands or tens of thousands or millions of dollars to create this mining farm, right, of specialized pieces of equipment that I can't use for literally anything else, right?
Yeah.
And you have this whole entire 1/3 of the group that probably has the most economic interest to see shit moving forward. They even went through on the test net, and there's a Chinese gentleman who owns like a large Ethereum mining setup or company or something. And he's like put forth the test net for the ETH, where we're going to get the forks, because I want to get your opinion on the prices, or if you think it will dump, kind of thing. Yeah. Where he implemented one of the changes that this fork is going to have is EIP 1550, I think it is, or 1555 or something, which protects for replay attacks, but also it goes through and it reverses the EIP 1559, which, for those of you who are not aware, EIP 1559 Ethereum implemented, and it takes a small portion of transaction fees, and instead of that transaction fee portion going to the miners, that gets burnt, right? So it's effectively reverting to what it was before then, so that the total amount of the transaction fee goes to the miner. So if you have a constituent group that is like 1/3 of the pie with a lot of money invested, now they are also going to be making more money on transactions because EIP 1559 is gone effectively. I don't know how adoption is going to play out. Like, I don't know how developers are going to think about this. I want to hear what are your thoughts about the developer community on this piece, because they might just move in one direction. But then I think about the developer community, and I think about people who have money in the system, and I think of like Warren Buffett. And people like Warren Buffett are scared of crypto because they don't understand crypto. So they're going to stay with the old thing. And we know, I think you had mentioned this even before we got on, or a few moments ago, 8 years works great. We got ETH works great. Like, why change this? It's going to continue to evolve and develop. And if I've got millions of dollars tied up there, why not just keep it there? So what are your thoughts on the developer community, and then the prices of all the tokens? Because everybody's going to get a free copy of Hex, right?
Well, that's right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Everyone's and this free copy narrative, is interesting, isn't it? Because that's the narrative that was, that Pulse Chain has been promoting, right? Or Richard Hart's been promoting for Pulse Chain, right? And the interesting thing there is that some people might now be thinking, well, does that spoil the narrative for the world's largest airdrop on Pulse Chain? Yeah, I don't know about that. I'll tell you why. In my opinion, I mean, the Pulse Chain airdrop is by far the world's largest airdrop still, despite this, because all the people that sacrificed, right, are going to get airdropped. Okay. PulseX, God knows what else, right? Power City, Mintro, whoever participated in all those sacrifices are going to get airdropped all of that as well. Now, of course, there was a cost for that, right? But essentially, at the end of the day, whoever's going to get airdrop Pulse Chain, well, I can't see that not doing a 10x fairly quickly, right? So, you may have put down a cost for that. I mean, let's say you put $1,000 down for the Pulse Chain sacrifice. Well, that's probably going to be worth 10K pretty quickly, right? So, yes, there was a cost for those sacrifices, but essentially it's still more free money at the end of the day, isn't it? Right? It's a 9K profit you might make quite quickly if you if you sacrifice 1K for Pulse Chain. So it's still, to me, by far the world's largest airdrop. And there's other tokens that people are going to be given for other sacrifices, like Kira token, which is some kind of NFT metaverse project. You can find out about some of this stuff on Twitter, Pulse Chain News and Talk on Twitter. They talk about all these other free, promotions that are going to happen on Pulse Chain. Well, we're going to get that stuff as well for free, right? For whoever's sacrificed for Pulse and PulseX, right? They're going to give away free Kira tokens. So it's still by far the world's largest airdrop as I see it. And the marketing is there as well, which it isn't for, the proof of work chain, right? So I don't think the narrative is affected at all, really. And I think Pulse Chain will be, I think it's quite clear that Pulse Chain has been designed so much better to prepare for all this as well.
There's on that front. So we had talked about this several months ago, and the shift to proof of stake on this magnitude is not there yet in the ecosystem of like life. It's just not available yet. Yeah. And so if you have something that has been working for 8 years, right?
Yeah.
The Ethereum proof of work network.
Yeah.
And now it's shifting to proof of stake, and there's validators. One point that was brought up that you and I talked about, and I had a concern about, and I think you also had a concern about this, is the centralization. We were putting into context relative to, say, Pulse Chain, right? That the centralization of that. And then I heard an interesting point where if you go look at validators, that is going to be the target of regulation. And how I think about this is, if we're at a football game, right? Or a soccer game, if we're in Australia, right? And there's 40,000 people there. And then say there's 40 doors to get out, right? And the doors are, 4.5 feet wide or whatever the case might be. And you can have 3 or 4 people go through it per time. Well, if I was nefarious, if I wanted to control 40,000 people, am I going to go into the stadium and just start waving guns around and start controlling people that way? Or am I going to take 40 dudes to control 40,000 people by just controlling all the entrances and exits with guns. And that's how the government's going to go through and attack these, because over 65% of the validators for proof of stake on Ethereum, where they're located in North America, in the US, right? You don't think that fucking Australia, UK, EU, Canada are going to follow what the US, and I'm not saying like as in it's a good thing. I'm just saying these westernized countries, they move lockstep. It's not like they have independence and autonomy from each other. Like if one country does something, it's very close. It's very high probability that the other countries are going to follow suit in some fashion. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to say, isn't it? I mean, look at the Bitcoin forks, right? You had Bitcoin Cash, right, creating like more scalability, right? And that was meant to be better. That was meant to be Bitcoin, but faster. Didn't work out too well, did it? Okay, it still has some value, right? It's, in terms of market cap and whatnot, and there's still a bit of money there. Had you had Bitcoin and kept that for the fork, you would have still had that. And then you got BSV and a bunch of others. But they didn't work out too well, right? So, and Bitcoin Cash was meant to be better, right? Meant to be faster, and it is faster, right? But overall, people stuck with Bitcoin, didn't they? Right, despite how slow it is, and because it's got other properties such as the security and the decentralization. So, I mean that could follow suit here, right? But having said that, on the flip side, you've got a large amount of interest in the proof of stake Ethereum model. I think I was reading that something like, is it 60% of all Ethereum staked or something is owned by the likes of Lido, Coinbase, and a couple of other big exchanges, right? Which is going to get very interesting, because in a proof of stake model, you have this concept of slashing if there's any kind of nefarious activity. Now, imagine if something happened and a whole bunch of the stakes were slashed from the centralized exchanges. That would get very interesting, wouldn't it? But anyway, that's another side topic. But there's a huge amount of interest in the proof of stake side, and a lot of projects like Chainlink, I think Aave as well, but certainly Chainlink and some of those other big high cap coins have actually said that they will exclusively only support proof of stake on Ethereum. They will not be supporting in any way proof of work. They'll be moving on and exclusively. So, there's two sides to this, and it's very difficult to know which way it will go. But certainly, you're right, Sam. Something that's been working very robust for 8 years and has basically never been hacked, from what I can understand. There must be value in that. I mean, recently on the Beacon chain, was it a few months ago, there was a 7-block reorg on the Beacon chain, right? 7-block reorg. I think that's one of the largest reorgs in history, or certainly in Ethereum's history, right? So that's not a good start, right? So
can you just briefly, can you tell what does that mean exactly when you say 7 block thing?
Yeah, just for understand. Yeah. So if you want to attack the network, right, and you want to do essentially a 51% style attack, right, to get control of the network, what the hackers can do is the blocks in the blockchain are strictly ordered, if you like, in the sense that a block of transactions points to the previous block in the blockchain, right? It's got a hash, and it points to the previous hash of the block in the blockchain. So there's this pointer, right? So you have a block, it points to the previous block, and that previous block points to the previous block, and it's all linked, hence the word blockchain, chain of blocks. Well, what a hacker can do is if they are going to launch a 51% style attack, they can basically reorganize those blocks. So what they can do is they can essentially remove, right? They can construct their own block, right? And before that, let's say 10-minute window, which is the case in Bitcoin, they can, if they can make a block quick enough and they can build a block quick enough with their, let's say, nefarious transactions, they can then reorganize the blockchain such that before the latest new good block gets in, they can put their own block in front, right? And they can actually essentially delete and reorganize blocks so that their nefarious blocks get in and get their transactions processed, and they can make a whole ton of money, right? So you can actually reorganize blocks. Now, on the blockchain. Now, it's typical that you can reorganize maybe 1 or 2 blocks, but to reorganize 7 blocks back is one hell of an achievement, and that, you know, would be very concerning. Does that explain roughly, Sam? What
no, that does. Thank you for taking the time to, you know, teach me about that.
That's right. Yeah.
So Lido, or however the name is said, and Coinbase, they and a bunch of other exchanges have a lot of money that is staked, right?
Yeah.
And these companies don't have like the North Star that is decentralization and do what's best for customers. Right. They have profit and shareholders, and if the government says bend over, they're going to bend over and use that as a tool to regulate Ethereum. Right now, the number that I heard was 66% of validators are going to be located in the United States currently at the moment. Right when I saw the information. Now, given that like a cluster of all the westernized countries, Australia, Canada, the entire block of the EU, the UK, all work synchronistically. If the United States decides to use validators as a way to control Ethereum, and we're currently in just the US at 66%, and then you add on Canada, Australia, EU, and the UK, that's what? Maybe 75%, maybe 80%. And you don't have something that's decentralized anymore.
No.
Not even slightly.
Well, that's right.
That's a little concerning. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's right. But apparently, most of the Ethereum network is, you know, it's all based on cloud servers in Amazon, isn't it? AWS and all sorts. So, you know, if that all goes down, if that cloud service goes down, so there's a lot of centralization already, some could claim, right, which is a bit of a concern. So, yeah, will it be exacerbated from the proof of stake model or not? It's going to, the whole thing is going to be very interesting, Sam. How to make any predictions is very difficult in this space. But, you know, the main thing, the conclusion to this is that you're right, that the proof of work model has been working very well. It's been working very well for Bitcoin, certainly. It's about the only proof of work model out there that has actually really worked well for 13 years. But Ethereum's done pretty well as well, right? Now, proof of stake is a new thing. It's unproven. Okay, there are other chains such as Tezos and that are running proof of stake, but they're not nearly as highly adopted. So you can't really go on that. And they've only been around a few years, right? The way I see it is if proof of stake model lasts for 5 years on Ethereum, right, untampered, with no vulnerabilities and whatnot found, then okay, I'll be sold on proof of stake. And I think there are some very promising things about it. I'm not saying there's anything bad per se, but it's just it's essentially untested, isn't it? We don't know. We haven't had the test of time to prove that proof of stake really works yet. And I think the real proof will be when Ethereum 2.0 is launched with proof of stake, and we'll know about 4 to 5 years later. That's the way I see it. With Bitcoin, we know it's 13 years proof of work, and it's been pretty solid, right? So, and the market has obviously realized that, right? It's still king, right? There's no doubt about that, right? It's still king. It's still number one. The market has said that, right? It's very clear. So, and there are other proof of work blockchains. Kadena is another new one, and I don't want to sidetrack at all here, but very quickly, Kadena is another proof of work blockchain, which is going to be very unique and something worth looking into at some point, I think, because that's a proof of work blockchain that uses this chain web, and it's basically sharding, Sam, on proof of work, right? So, Ethereum, we talked a lot.
So it's a lot cheaper and faster?
What's that?
So it's a lot cheaper and faster? That's my idea of
what
sharding is?
That's the whole, essentially Kadena is going to be sharding, but on a proof of work blockchain, unlike Ethereum sharding on proof of stake, right? So apparently on Kadena, it's going to be lots of parallel chains. It can grow up to 2,000 chains, right? And it doesn't need to do huge amounts of extra work and hash rate because it's got all these parallel chains running to get the scalability. So you don't need to have this massive increase in hash rate to keep the security like Bitcoin does, right? So there's some really interesting stuff there that Kadena are doing, right? And they've got their own DEX, by the way. Now, I haven't looked at it. It's called KADDEX, KADDEX. Now, I've only I've only read something very brief about this, and they have a halving. The tokenomics is a halving every year. It's a billion supply with a halving every year, unlike 4 years for Bitcoin. Now, all I'm saying is there are other projects out there that are worth taking a look at. You don't need to go balls deep into all these things, but just that is enough to go, this is something that could be interesting to look at, right? You just need to know enough to make some kind of investing decision. You don't have to go balls deep on everything. Not everyone has the time, right? Those who have the time, fantastic. But if you don't have the time, just know enough to know where things are going. And that's, there's so many things out there like this that are worth looking at. Yeah.
So question for you then. Okay. So we have a couple places, like I think it was Chainlink and OpenSea, right? The marketplace for NFTs, saying that OpenSea is not going to support the copies of these people's supposed one-off, like non-fungible token pictures of goofy shit, right? It's not going to do it. Chainlink is like, we're not going to support the ETH network. But then on the flip side, you have the largest exchange in the world, Binance, saying that they would support it. You have FTX, right? And then you have a plethora of like smaller exchanges already having placeholders there for ETHW. So now, when I put this into context, we've got Ethereum Classic, which is the OG Ethereum, right?
Yeah.
And then we have Ethereum like 1.0 right now. And there's like, a 30x difference in price. Maybe like, by the way, the Ethereum Classic this morning or within the last 24 hours has just gone like massively berserk in terms of going up.
Right.
So where do you think ETHW, and obviously this is a game of conjecture here, but where you have something maybe say 1,500 for ETH 1.0 and we have maybe say $50 for ETH Classic. Do you think that ETHW, right, the proof of work one, is going to sit in the middle between those two ranges, or do you think it's going to sit maybe closer to parity with, where currently?
Wow.
I know it's just conjecture, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's a big one. You put me on the spot with that one. I really, that's a tough one. I mean, I would probably say, if I had to guess, probably the middle sounds about right, because as you say, the value that's on there, the thing that's been running for 8 years, and these exchanges are going to support it. They're going to at least support the ETHW coin, right, to get essentially airdropped, if you like, or however you want to express it. Whether the adoption will survive on it is the really big question, isn't it? But really difficult to know, Sam. Really, but I would have said, if you put all three together, the middle range sounds about right, doesn't it? All things considered, right? This chain has been running for 8 years with all that adoption. Doesn't sound like it's going to be much worse than the middle in terms of price, does it? But that's just a pure hunch. I have no technical indicators that I can back that up with. So, but just a guess. It's just pure speculation, which is,
100%. So I know I completely agree, because also when you think of like what brought Ethereum Classic around was fraud, right, and hacking. This has at least a better. It's not coming. We're not having a fork because some nefarious actor did something crazy.
That's right. So I think there's value in it. How long the value will last is another big question, right? Is there going to be a huge dump, for the people who hate the proof of work chain as a rebellion, from the proof of stake guys? I don't know. What is the ratio? Who are the these are the figures I don't know. Who are the whales on the proof of stake side? Who are the whales on the Ethereum proof of work side? I don't have those kind of figures. But my hunch is that there's going to be a larger group on the proof of stake side, with the power, who might dump the coins on the proof of work side. That's just a hunch. I don't have the figures to know, the whales on both sides of the chain and what power and influence they can have to affect the price, right? That would be very interesting to find out. But look, whichever way it happens, it's just fascinating, Sam. And I never knew that it was going to be a complete system state, if the fork goes ahead, that is.
So let's talk about that. There's already a test net out. There's already POW
Right.
testnet.
Yeah,
There's already a bridge out there. So to go back and forth between ETH W and ETH, right? 2.0.
Right.
So
Right.
I want to hear your thoughts again. This is conjecture, but let's put ourselves in, say, Richard Hart's shoes. Everybody's going to get a free copy of your fucking shit. And you have the desire to be like, bigger than where you are right now. How do you think he responds? And then what do you think the price, or do you think there is going to be value in the free hex that people are going to get?
Listen, that's a great question, isn't it? Look, I don't think Richard Hart will be phased by it at all. But in terms of Pulse Chain, anyway, I don't think there's any. I personally don't see there's any threat there to Pulse Chain. If that's partly what you were asking about, how Richard Hart is going to react to all that.
Well, I'm just curious, if you got 100,000, say if you have 100,000 hacks, right?
Right.
And now you have 200,000 hacks.
Right.
Is it just gonna? Do you think somebody's or somebody else is gonna be like, okay, well now you can stake Ethereum POW through this portal for hex because it's just a smart contract, so it just holds the same value as hex on Ethereum 2.0.
Well, that's true. That's true. I mean, he may do. I mean, wow. I mean, it's just
right.
This is all unexpected, really. I didn't know that this was going to be the case with, that it was going to be a complete system state copy if that's what they do. Wow. But so this is all very new to me, and it's a bit like, oh, I hadn't thought about it too much, to be honest. But, is there going to be a bit of dilution? Probably. There'll be a bit of a dilution. Someone was talking about a stock split last night type scenario. I don't think that. I think a stock split is a strict split, right? If you now got a copy, that's different, isn't it? I mean, if you have a copy of the coin, you surely, if anything, isn't it most likely to be a net gain? Even if it's a 10% gain, it might not be 100% gain, a complete double, but you might still have a 10% gain from the copy, right? It's still more likely, in my opinion, to be a net gain.
That's a great point. That's a fantastic point. I mean, like
isn't it?
If you have your apartment and you get it, or a house, right? If I have a house and I get a copy of my fucking house, even if it's a copy that's subpar construction, still has some value. So that's a net
exactly.
Great
And so, and so I think, it's a net positive. There might be some dilution, but I still think if you're getting a copy, I have a feeling that you're still going to be up, right? And especially, as you say, it's a copy on the Ethereum proof of work chain, then in my opinion, that still has a lot of value. I'm just, to be honest, I'm a little unprepared for this because I watched your video on it last night, Sam, and I was like, oh, and I haven't had too much time to think about all this. And it's like, hot off the press, isn't it, this one? And I don't think anyone else has covered it.
I don't see many, at least in this community. But when you think about this community with the understanding of Pulse, and I don't know all the other communities, so I'm naive in this sense. But if anything, I would say this community is probably the best equipped mentally to grasp this because we've been talking or thinking about Pulse and what happens when you get a system state copy over to a new network. We've got a bridge coming along, right? Liquidity is super important, right? So if people are bridging assets back and forth between these two things,
I mean, the only thing I would say to all this, Sam, is it's quite clear that Richard Hart is not a fan of proof of work. Right? He is not a fan of proof of work. He's a huge fan of proof of stake. And that's what the Pulse chain blockchain is going to be modeled on. So it depends how much, of a cult follower you are and the Hex community is of Richard Hart, right? Which a lot of them are, right? Now, if you're a real dedicated cult follower of Richard Hart, who believes almost everything he says, which a lot of them do, and I do to some extent, then a lot of them may not, they might cash out their hex on the proof of work chain and move it across, right? But that's still okay, right? Cash out the hex on the proof of work chain, move it across to the proof of stake chain, get an even bigger copy on Pulse chain. I mean, whichever way it happens, it still sounds like a gain to me. I
No, I completely agree. I don't know why more people are not talking about this. Free money is something that we all fucking like.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
whether
It's going to be interesting.
Whether it's 5 cents on the dollar or 87 cents on the dollar or even close to parity. Yep. If you got 10 grand and now you have 20 grand, or you have 10 grand, now you have $12,000. It's still free fucking money.
You're still up, right? And so I find it hard to see a scenario where you're going to be down, put it that way. So again, just my hunch, but it's all very interesting, isn't it? And it's all very experimental, which is why it's so hard to make predictions, because this is all very new. This complete system state copy concept, which is what Pulse Chain is going to do, is very new, right? It's never been done before, so very hard to make predictions, and it's just fascinating to see how it all plays out. And yeah, let's see.
Yeah. So you had mentioned it's going to be like a net gain, and one of the things that has been really gaining a lot of steam over the last 2 months has been hedron, right? So I think we should talk a little bit about hedron. And with Icosa, that was really able to put a lot of hot air into that balloon, and things have really been taking off.
Yes, I bought some more hedron last night. So right onto it.
Oh, good man. I have been purchasing hedron
every day. You said, is that right?
Yes. From the profits on LP. Because it's like,
well, what I'd love you to do, Sam, is, so I think I'm fairly well versed on hedron and what that's about. Icosa, I'm a little bit more vague on, but if I could just see if I can sum some of this up and see where maybe I'm incorrect or where I'm not clear on things, right? Because that Sloth guy, Crypto Sloth, he explains things pretty well, right? But even though he explained things pretty well, I still had to replay it 2 or 3 times to just slow him down just that little bit when I was watching his video with, I think, Corey Costa, when he did a stream with him about a week ago on all this. And the way he was explaining it was that, okay, you have T shares with your staked hex, and depending on the number of T shares or B shares specifically, it depends how much hedron you can mint, right? But also you can get an advance in hedron, right? So you can take out a loan in hedron and mint it all on day one, right? On the first day, all in advance, depending on the number of T shares that you have in your stake, right? But then what he was saying was that there was a problem, actually, because what he was saying, Sam, I don't know if you watched that stream, but what he was saying was that there was an initial problem with the distribute. Well, I think it was all by design, right? But the way it was distributed, all the whales got most of the hedron supply that they could mint, right? The sharks and the whales. So then what happened was that the other little guys, they didn't have that much that they could mint because the hex stakes weren't so large, because it's not like you have 100 T shares nowadays, right? Compared to maybe, a year and a half ago. So then what happened is no one was taking out hedron advances. And if no one is taking out hedron advances, what that meant was that no hex HSI stakes could be liquidated. Because as I understand it, when you take out a hedron advance, you have to put down as collateral your hex HSI stake. Is that correct? So what that meant was that no hedron advances were being taken, or very few, which meant no HSI stakes were getting liquidated, which meant that no one could bid at auction, which then means that the hedron price wouldn't necessarily go up. So now he said that to get the grease wheels turning, or that get the grease to turn the wheels and get them spinning, you have Icosa now. And what that enables you to do is you can sell your hex HSI encapsulated stake to the Icosa contract, and the Icosa contract immediately buys up that hex stake, that HSI hex stake. So you have a guaranteed buyer. And then now that you have a guaranteed buyer, what I think it does, it then puts the stake to auction 90 days later, where people can then bid on that HSI stake with their hedron, I believe. And then that gets the grease in the system and gets everything spinning to then make them all kind of work together nicely with each other. Is that sort of, does that summarize one part of
Yes, very, very nicely done. I think that you actually have a really good understanding of that.
Right. Yeah.
The other way that it helps grease the wheels, so to speak, when you have something that there wasn't really a point of holding it, right? Because you're like,
Right.
you see, you have an HSI stake of $1,000, and you can advance hedron, right? You can
Yeah.
borrow your future hedron that you can earn across your entirety of your stake and pull it to today, and you have
Yeah.
$1,000 hex stake, and you can borrow like 30 cents or $3 against it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, right? If you have
Right.
a couple $100,000 house to borrow $12 against your couple $100,000 house, it doesn't make a terrible lot of sense to risk that where you have a contract that can take your house
Sure.
if you don't pay that $12 back. Now, the other thing that helps grease the wheels with this is that Icosa
Yeah.
creates demand for hedron. So there's two
Right.
demand. This is why I'm far more bullish on hedron than Icosa. Well, plus it's undervalued in my opinion. But with the Icosa, when you sell that encapsulated HSI to Icosa,
Yeah.
it takes an advance. So it
Yeah.
borrows all that hedron,
Yeah.
and then like you mentioned, it goes up for
Yeah.
auction. And that amount of hedron that is borrowed goes to the Icosa pool so that
Right.
they're earning all of that. And
Yeah. Yeah.
what do you use hedron for? You use that for purchasing HSI stakes in the liquidation market.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So
Interesting. Right. Right. And I sort of understood the relationship between hedron and hex. So, for example, hedron to some extent pushes up the hex price, right? Because you can now stake for 5555 without suffering the penalty, right?
well,
So
think about what you said, how you get a copy. I thought it was a
right.
very great analogy when you said this
Yeah.
a few moments ago, right? If I have a diamond ring and I get an exact copy of that diamond ring, even though it's a copy of a diamond ring, maybe it's a synthetic diamond and not a natural diamond,
Yeah.
just still has fucking value,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
And when you tape on an additional token that you
Yeah.
get for free, and
Yeah.
that additional token has 20x in the last 45 days, right? That's how I view the value
Yeah.
to hex.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
But
And
please go on.
so yeah, no, that makes sense. So hedron pushes up the hex price because now you can stake for much longer periods without suffering the penalty for early end staking because you can trade that stake, right? And by staking for longer takes more hex off the market, which is buy pressure for hex. So that bit I get. On the other way around, hex pulls up the price of hedron, right? Doesn't it? Because now you can bid for HSI stakes with your hedron, and you might need to buy more hedron on the open market to make that bid successful to win that auction, right? So is that one way of seeing it? So I sort of see that side. I just still struggling to see the Icosa side. I mean, Icosa, okay, so if you stake hedron, you get Icosa. If you stake Icosa, you get hedron and Icosa.
That's
Where
it.
does, yeah.
So that's because this is where I'm at there too. So the Icosa piece. So I want to break down. There's three parts. There's three ways to dispose of a HSI. You can convert it to an NFT and sell it on OpenSea. Option one. Option two. You could take, and I don't know if you caught like this, but you could take the advance on your HSI. So say if I put and I built a spreadsheet to like go through it or whatever, basically, but if I do a 555 stake, right, and I can buy one T share, that T share is about 77. It costs about 7,800 hex to buy one T share 15 years out, which equates to, as prices of the other day, about $315. So now if you use that as like the threshold of what hedron could be valued at, which would mean that if you had a 15-year stake that was $1,000 and you borrowed all of your hedron against it, you would effectively get $1,000 today.
Right.
Right. Option number 2, you take that advance, right? So you can
Right.
sell your shit. You can sell your shit on OpenSea. You can take an advance against it. Third option, and not necessarily as in the importance of them,
Yeah.
they're just 3 different ways of doing
Sure.
things.
Yeah.
Option number 3 is through Icosa. So you're like, why use Icosa to sell the contract here? Well, I don't see the value in that if you have a rational player that has some level of information and acts in their own self-interest. Meaning, if I take the time and I convert it to an NFT, and then I take that and I bring it to OpenSea, and then I put a price on it and I sell that on there, I would assume the market for that is pretty not liquid, because you have NFT people who don't understand DeFi in the sense that we understand DeFi, and the marketplace for NFTs that allow you to get back into a smart contract that earns you trustless interest is a concept that's probably pretty fucking hard for a lot of people to grasp, right? At least initially.
Yes.
So I don't see that being as a super great option. But say, for example, that gave you a $800 worth of value if you did it that way, because the market's not super efficient and whatnot. Your $1,000 hex stake sells for $800. Say if you go through Icosa, and the rate at which you get Icosa is based upon the burn amount of hedron.
Yeah.
So say that equates to X number of Icosa, and that times the market value gives you $850 a day, or $850 for your $1,000 stake. And then say there's an advance on hedron that's $900. Why would anybody use Icosa to sell their contract when you have in OpenSea, you have multiple steps to go through in a very illiquid market? With Icosa, you have immediate buyer, so that's convenient, right? So that could incentivize people for sure.
Yeah.
Easiness is a big incentive for a lot of people. But if you can get more money while still retain ownership of your HSI, at least for 90 days, right? Like you have if you're basically creating an option, you're like, okay, shit, I need $1,000. Let me sell this. I'm going to get $900 for this. But now you have the option to pay that back over the next 90 days.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And maybe there's a marketplace where I'm like, hey, Russ, I took this $1,000 hex stake. It's going to go up for auction. And if you loan me the money, I'll pay this back and I'll just transfer you the NFT. Like maybe there's a marketplace where friends could do that so that they don't lose that shit and they can help out a buddy. But I don't necessarily, which I believe is going to happen, we continue to see this rise in hedron price because we have demand for hedron. A boatload of it's locked up, right, in Icosa.
Yes.
Now, in mid-November, a boatload of it's going to be burnt, right?
Right.
So you're going to have this demand increase, and if the demand increases enough where the hedron advanceable amount comes on parity with or above what you get in terms of USD for Icosa, why are people going to use Icosa? I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe the convenience.
I guess you could stake Icosa to get more hedron, right?
True.
But I mean, that's the simple way I've been looking at it. And I've got some newbie friends that I've been trying to explain this to. And, in summary, I just told them so far that you can stake hedron to get Icosa, and you can stake Icosa to get hedron and Icosa. And to them, that was like enough. They didn't want to go down the arbitrage path and all these advances and all this other complicated stuff, because it is pretty difficult to get your head around, isn't it? Right. So although I understand things on the advanced side, the arbitrage side is something that's pretty advanced as well, and requires a lot of activity. So there's all sorts of interesting arbitrage plays in there that I've heard about, but it's just very complicated, isn't it? I mean, it's whoever designed this is just absolute genius, I think. But it takes a while to get your head around this. Yeah.
Which is an advantage to us, right? Because we're having this conversation.
That's right.
And most of the marketplace doesn't understand hedron yet.
And this comment here, Sam, this is true. I've heard people saying this, that staking Icosa generates more hedron than hex staking. So there's some value right there, right, for Icosa. So
Thank you
now,
for that comment.
how long that lasts, I don't know, but yes, it does seem to be. I have been hearing people saying that it generates more hedron than hex does. So that's interesting, isn't it? But yes, okay, well, really interesting stuff there. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk to you, Sam, about was Matty Allen's proposal. Got some time for that?
Yes, we do. We have about 10 minutes left, 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah. So I think that'll be a nice way to round it off. I do have some questions about liquidity pools for you, but I can do that offline. Actually, they're just 3 simple questions. We can do that offline if you want. So Matty Allen's proposal. Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I think it's a step, but if that's the final product, I don't think for me I'm that excited.
Russ, can you give, there's going to be people watching who don't know what Matty Allen's project is. Can you just give context, like what the project, the essence from your understanding, and we're not experts in this, guys, but what is your understanding of the project? And then we'll go in and talk about it.
Yeah. So basically what he was saying in a nutshell is that most of the value from hex has come from time locking, right? So you time lock your hex, and when you time lock your hex, you get inflation, right? Paid to those who have time locked it, as in the stakers. And he is right in saying that with hex, the majority of the APY doesn't actually come from inflation. It comes from the fact that you time locked it, right, with your principal. And so the evidence, he says, is clear that it's the most of the value from hex came from the fact that you time locked it, right? And so what he's trying to do is say, well, based on that concept, why don't we time lock or create a feature that allows us to time lock Pulse and PulseX when Pulse Chain is launched, right? And I think it's going to be in this separate vault called smartvault.me, right? Now, the problem is that, okay, so if you time lock your Pulse and your PulseX, it means that you're not going to sell it, or certainly not going to sell it too easily. And therefore, you'll hold on to your gains. Okay, that's nice. But the thing is, you're not going to get any yield from that. Now, Matty Allen's proposal, I think there's a flaw in it, because what he's saying is most of the gains for hex were from the fact that you time locked it. That is true. But the reason why you time locked it in the first place was because there was a yield benefit from it, right? That's reason. So the reason why people time lock their hex was because of the yield benefit in the first place, right? Had there not been the yield benefit in hex, I don't think people would have time locked it, right? So now what he's saying is he's taken that concept, right, and said, okay, well, we can now time lock Pulse and PulseX, and you'll get, you'll get some gains on it, and you won't cash out too quickly. That is true. But the fact is I don't think the incentive is going to be there in the first place to time lock Pulse and PulseX if there's no yield. I just don't see that incentive unless you are extremely impulsive person who has no control whatsoever, in which case you probably shouldn't be in the crypto space at all. But anyway, let's say you are extremely impulsive and you've got a few mental problems or whatnot, then maybe. But I just don't see there's going to be demand for that.
Even still, you have options like why just hypothetically speaking, and I'm sure he's trying to provide value, but like why, well, I would like to think that, at least I don't know him personally, but why would I lock up my Pulse when there's I could take Pulse and I can earn yield by staking it with a validator, like
on the DEX,
well, I could do it on the DEX, I could do it on the DEX, I could do it on a validator, or I could there's a way.
That's right.
That's
exactly right. See, the only way I think this can work, Sam, is if, and I don't think it can happen actually, is if Matty Allen's idea was integrated with the PulseX DEX. So I don't think he can do that, right? Because he's not part of the Pulse Chain development team. But in theory, in a very hypothetical ideal world, you would integrate this time locking with the PulseX DEX. So you'd have a time lock feature in the PulseX, in the PulseX DEX, where you could time lock it. Now, that still wouldn't be incredibly good, but what it would allow you to do is to stake your PulseX, get the yield, right, and have it locked for a year. So you know for 1 year you're always getting yield, right? And then when you cash out that yield, you just need to lock again. Now, it's still not great because there would be no extra yield for staking longer, right? Like Hex, right? But at least it would allow you to not cash out that yield for a year. But I just got to the point where I've been thinking about it. I'm thinking, okay, Hex is great. It does some wonderful things. But does everything need to be like Hex, right? Why can't Hex be unique? Why can't we say that Hex has got this unique value proposition, which is the ability to time lock it, and the longer you time lock, the more yield you get? That's a great unique value proposition for Hex that pretty much nothing else can do. Why? Not everything needs to be like Hex. And I think to a certain extent, that seems to be in part of the design with Pulse Chain and PulseX. And that's what Richard Hart has been doing, that you just stake your PulseX, you can unstake anytime, you can harvest the yield anytime, and use it as income anytime. If you want to time lock it, you know, use the time locking feature in Hex and time lock your Hex. I don't see that everything needs to be like Hex, you know?
I agree. There's even if you just look at Pulse by itself, I don't see, for me, why would I take something that can earn me yield and put it in a place that doesn't earn me yield, doesn't earn me any yield? Like there's 4 off the top of my head. I can stake in a validator.
As long as you're, you know, as long as you're a sensible, you know, with your investments, right? And you need some of that if you're in crypto in the first place. As long as you hold that PulseX and, you know, you don't cash out impulsively, then you're going to get yield on it. And you're going to get both. You're going to get the gain on PulseX and you're going to get the yield on PulseX, right? So you're going to be better off, right? I mean, it's just, So look, if this is a step, if this is a step, that's okay. And then if he takes the feedback and he modifies it and tweaks it later to do something better, then great. And I think that it's okay to try things, and things can fail. It's okay to fail, right? I'm not saying this will fail, but what I'm saying is okay to experiment. It's okay to have ideas. I think that's great. I mean, that's partly what I did a lot in project management. It's okay to try things. It's okay to have ideas. It's okay if that idea fails, because when it fails, you can say, okay, this didn't work, but how can we make it better? Now, if we go down that path of this didn't quite work, how can we make it better? Then that's great. Then this is a nice little first step, right? But if this is the end step, then I don't see it working out, but that's just my opinion. I certainly won't be doing it. I certainly won't be doing it, but you know.
I completely agree with that. And this could be the first iteration in a iterative process to do that. Since we have a couple of minutes left, so I'd like you said you had a couple of minutes related to LP, right? Liquidity providing. Let's dive into those real quick and see if we can wrap those up.
Well, the big question I had, Sam, was the 1% fee tier for, say, the Hex ETH pool, right? It's typically a 0.3% fee tier by default. The 1% fee tier, is there extra risk if you selected the 1% fee tier? There must be, right?
There's no extra risk other than if you think about risk as in reduced yield on your money. Right? There's no risk as in like you're going to lose yield as in Hex ETH. It's more so the risk of the opportunity cost to earn a higher yield, right? Because if I'm a prudent investor, am I going to choose the 0.3% pool or the 1% pool? Fucking 0.3%. Like you don't have to be super like intelligent or have a lot of functioning gray matter to figure that shit out, right? So the volume of trading, which is where the fees come from in LP, there's not as much volume in that pool.
I see. So you'll get 1% for each transaction, but there's a hell of a lot less transactions in the 1% pool. I see. Right.
But it's not necessarily a bad thing. Because let's use an example with say Hex, right? We've got like Hex Hedron, Hex Maxi, Hex Icosa, all these other like ones that are coming up around it. And even if you have a pair of those two that is 1% that very rarely ever gets traded through, doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to earn fees. It's not going to be the maximum amount, but there is, say if Hex was paired with 12 other tokens,
Right.
and somebody comes in with USDC and they go to the USDC Hex pair, and they have an order of $50,000, and they're going to buy Hex. Well, what happens? Well, there's the automated router within Uniswap, which is going to be programmatically designed so that it finds the best price for the individual who's using Uniswap. So that you have in these pools with 1%, you have runoff. Meaning, if you think about the 12 pools on a higher level, what are the essence of what those pools are is their ratios. So if you have a ratio, there's triangular arbitrage, and there's different types of arbitrage and all this fancy shit or whatever. But effectively, if you can have a ratio, say, for example, it was like oranges, bananas, and apples, and each one of those trades 1 for 1 for 1, and this could be Hex, Maxi, and fucking Hedron, right? Or whatever it is. But we're just using it for the concept of apples, bananas, and oranges. I can't take one apple, put it into the system, and come back with 3 oranges. There's no way if they all trade 1 for 1 for 1. But in the example where if somebody puts in $50,000, that's going to drive the ratio in the first pair USDC. And then because that ratio is different, whether it is because of the auto router or arbitrators who are going through and arbitrating the ratios so that you can't put one apple in and come back with 2 out of the system, there is volume in those pairs, even though if you go to uniswap.org, if you go to info.uniswap.org, they don't show volume in these pairs. I've set the pairs up before.
Sure.
You definitely earn money in these pairs. It's just not as great as it is if you do like the main pair.
The main pair, brilliant. No, that explains it really well, Sam. I really appreciate that. And also, when you narrow the range more, the return in the Uniswap calculator goes higher, right? If you put a narrower range. Is that partly because, well, one, you're putting thicker liquidity in that part of the pool, I guess, but is it also to cover your costs? Because if you do a narrower range, you're more likely that you're going to have to reset your position more often, which is more and more gas fees, which is more and more cost. So is the extra APY designed to cover that extra cost for resetting your position more often if you have a narrower range? Is that one way to see it or not?
That is one way to look at it, but like the way the system's designed is actually why it takes place like that. Right. And if you think about, like, you know, when you go to Carnival or something and they have those big boxing gloves where it's like mammoth. And if I have one of those big boxing gloves on and I go and I fucking punch you, you're going to be like, haha, funny. Like, you don't even notice it, right? Because the force is distributed over this giant, like, fake boxing glove.
Right.
Well, if you go to V2 Uniswap and you just provide liquidity over the full range, because that's all that's possible there. That's effectively wearing a giant boxing glove, and you're not very effective at, like, knocking somebody out, right? Or defending yourself. When you have a concentrated liquidity position, that's like me taking the glove off and me hitting somebody with my fist. Right? It's going to hurt a lot more, and there's a lot more force doing this than with this giant padded glove. And when you think about concentration, it's instead of providing liquidity over this entire range and only earning fees exactly where the price is, you're spread out over here. I take all my capital and I put it exactly where the price is. So my proportion of the pool at this spot is greater, so I earn more fees.
Brilliant. And how often, Sam, when you've done liquidity providing, how often do you per month would you typically need to reset your position? So I don't know whether you do wide or narrow range, but how often are you typically resetting your position? Is it once a month? Is it 4 times a month? Is it 20 times a month? Like, what's the ballpark?
Well, so initially when I started with LP, I did pretty wide range because I was trying to learn and everything like that.
But
as time goes on, I like to earn higher fees, and fees currently have been relatively low. So I've been doing a narrow range. Last month, I probably did let's say 18 to 22 adjustments. So
wow.
that means
in a month, almost every day.
Almost every day. But
Wow.
I earned 27%, 26.7%. Right. So
Wow.
like, I
Okay.
mean, is that like,
interesting.
you know what I mean? You have a cost to that, as in your time.
Yeah.
But I sit at this computer and work, right? And the other computer for crypto is over here. So,
but you also have a cost in terms of the fees to keep ending and restarting the pool, don't you? But okay, great to know that. Now, my other final question, Sam, before you go, and I'll need to go as well, so this is well timed.
Perfect.
Is I noticed, I looked at the top pools on Uniswap Analytics yesterday, because I have done a fair bit of research. I've read all the documentation and everything, but I looked at the top pools, and you know, Hex and ETH was one of them, although it's come down a bit recently in terms of the returns, about maybe 5% a month. But then I found
that, but yes,
mate, that was on a 0.3% fee tier. Might have been the range I selected, but anyway,
yes.
I looked at the hedron, or hedron, should I say? I keep saying hedron, but anyway, hedron USDC pair, and when I put that into the calculator, that was a 1% fee tier by default. You couldn't select another tier. It only allowed you to select 1% fee tier, I believe. And I put $1,000 in a calculator, and the yield, it said per month, was 144%, meaning that I would get $1,400 in yield for $1,000. Now, am I missing something here?
So the calculator is not always perfectly accurate. But
no, I wouldn't expect it to be. No.
But one of the things that happens is, from my experience, and I don't know if it's 100% right all the time, but people's behavior changes, with meaning the volume in hedron trading has drastically increased, where the pool of people providing liquidity hasn't changed as much as that. So the people earning fees, if you and I are in the pool, and then the trading goes from, you know, $100 million, say $100 per day of trading activity back and forth that you and I are splitting, and then it jumps to 1,000, and then 10,000, and then $10 million of trading activity back and forth, and nobody else is coming to the pool, then you and I are earning a boatload of fees. And I have set up pools with USDC and hedron, and the fees are stupid. Like,
yeah, it looks, I looked at the stats, and it's a $6.5 million pool, and in the last 24 hours about 6.3 million was traded in 24 hours, it says, in volume in 24 hours, like almost the size of the pool, right? Like and in the last,
insane.
It's insane. So, you know, that's why I thought, is there something I'm missing? Is it the calculator? I mean, I guess the only way to do this is try it out, right? Put $1,000 in and see what happens. But according to the calculator, it said you would get $1,400 in fees or in yield per month. I know it's an estimate. That is more than your principal that you put in. I mean, that just sounds absolutely, I mean, that surely isn't sustainable, but take the opportunities while you can, I suppose. But I was astounded. I looked at it, I thought, okay, well, maybe it's worth a try, and there's only one way to find out, right?
If you've never done it before, and you have a grasp on like opportunity cost, as in impermanent loss, I definitely think it's something very interesting to check out, and it's fun earning fees every day. You could pull the fees if you choose, depending on how much gas is. You can pull
and Sam, just very quickly before you go, so is it fair to say that you can't basically lose your principal?
Yes,
that's right. Yeah.
Unless the only way you can lose your principal
in dollar cost, in dollar amount,
in dollar amount, is if we have the Aussie scam coin and Ethereum, right? So you provide the Aussie scam coin and Ethereum. Right. What happens over time is you're left with the scam coin, and then what happens if I run that scam coin and I pull the liquidity? Now you have a permanent loss because you're holding the shittier performing token, and you've got 8 gazillion of these fucking things, and there's no liquidity. There's no liquidity.
Yeah, I've heard you. I've seen you talking about this before. Yes, it's an interesting example, that one. Yeah, okay. So in that scenario, yes. But otherwise, with any kind of legit pool, it doesn't seem possible that you can lose your principal. Now, the only thing is what if the Uni token crashes. So let's say the uni token, because that's the yield. You get paid in uni, right? The yield. So
no. That's the beautiful part about this. So if you get, so what happens on Uniswap is, say we're talking about Hex and Ethereum, right?
Yeah.
When somebody takes Ethereum and they swap it for Hex, they do the 0.3%. The 0.3% is paid in the direction of the tokens that are swapped. So ETH going into Hex means 0.3% is paid in ETH. Now, if somebody has Hex and they're going into ETH, that means they pay 0.3% of Hex. So the fees earned are of the tokens that are in that pool. So if you're bullish on Hex and hedron, you could provide liquidity in those two pools, and then you earn the tokens that you fucking like. I love liquidity.
Really? I thought it was uni token was the yield. I thought that was the whole point of the uni token. So, oh my God, it makes me question even more. What on earth is the use case for the uni token? But anyway, all right, I'll leave it at that, and I have to look into that a bit more, Sam. But that's a great point to end on. That has just made my day. That has. So, wow, that is a shock, a great shock. So. That's a great way to end.
Perfect. I know.
On a high. Why not? Yeah.
Yes, and you're going to be heading out to your girlfriend are going to be going doing something.
Yeah, we just go. She loves her coffee, and we just go out and we have a morning coffee together and a bit of breakfast and go for a walk and that. You know, we live near the water here, so it's quite nice, nice area. So we'll be doing that, and then maybe go for a run this afternoon and keep my fitness up. Being a lifeguard.
I love it. This has been Russ. This has been awesome. I enjoyed the conversation. If you guys enjoyed the conversation, make sure you press the like button, the subscribe button. Check out down below. If you want us to cover different topics or talk about different things or whatever, let me know down below in the comments. I'm gonna take us out of here with some DeFi Proof. I don't know if you've heard, Russ, of DeFi Proof, but he is you have heard of him, right?
Yeah. I've seen you guys interview him and have him on the show and talk to him about all his music production and all sorts. Yeah.
Yes. So this is, did you hear, and this is straight up me like bragging as in like, I'm proud of this. I think it's cool as shit. I've never been in a song before. So I'm going to take us out with the song that DeFi wrote, where I never gets old hearing my name in the song. Russ, I appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful time with your girlfriend today.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Sam. Chat soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You already know what time it is. Crypto in the morning. Crypto in the morning. Crypto in the morning. Waiting on phone. Crypto in the morning. 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 Waiting on phone. Crypto in the morning. Crypto in the morning. Smoking a blunt on my way to the gym. 11 a.m. and I'm already tuned in. Got me some Hex and I'm making a state. Got me some hedron, I'm making it rain. Pay me some Maxi and that just in case. Gym ready, set me to show you the way.